What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you my top 5 core exercises for calisthenics skills. Actually, my top 10. This is part 2. You can check out part 1 right here. But here you have 5 more core exercises to improve your planche, front lever, human flag, press to handstand, visit, and any possible calisthenics skill that you can imagine. Let's go. Alright guys, we'll begin right away with the first exercise, the ab roll out. Let's get right away into the exercise. I don't want to waste that much time. If you want a little bit more specificity into how the core works and everything that I talk about, you can check it out in part 1 right here. But the ab roll out is an amazing exercise. We begin with an anti-extension exercise, just like the hollow body hold and just like the planche hold. Anti-extension means that your body doesn't get into extension, so we flex our spine in order to keep our spine either neutral or slightly flexed for calisthenics skills. The ab roll out, the best transferability that I see will be towards the front lever because we are involving our lats. We're doing a straight arm pulling strength, basically like a lat pull down, and we combine that with anti-extension of the core. Now, even though our lats are involved, just like in the dragon flag, for example, the main focus of this exercise is keeping our core engaged and do not get into an extension of our backs. So you can involve your lats as much as you feel, and the more you feel it, the better, but just focus on not arching from the lumbar spine and really keeping that core engaged. Now, the position and how we're gonna perform this exercise, there are many compensations that we can do, so we're gonna be talking about those. And let's begin first. Let me demonstrate the exercise, and then we're gonna go through some easier variations and then some advanced variations. So the exercise, basically, you tuck your pelvis in, you go in, maximum range of motion, and then you come back. As a beginner that you're starting out, I would actually highly recommend that you get very good with hollow body holds and with planks that will teach your body not to anti-extend, to keep your core engaged, or the anterior part of your core activated so you don't get into extension. But if you wanna give this exercise a shot, then I would go have range of motion and then come back. However, if you don't feel it and if the range of motion is very, very short, do not rush to this exercise. There is no point of doing exercises, I said on the previous video, that basically your body's not ready for it. So only get here once you can get at least not a 180 degree, but at least that you are like right here, so you can really, your core is actually challenged in the position. Your shoulders and your scapula is going to be depressed, so we get some lat activation, and it's going to be slightly retracted or slightly protracted. That will depend on where do you feel the lats, but not full protracted, not full retracted, simply a position where you feel your lats. Posterior pelvic tilt, of course, so tuck your pelvis under and feel your glutes and your lower abdominals as much as you can throughout the entire movement. And the goal of the exercise is going out and in without losing that core contraction. So a poor form would be something like you go here, you're keeping the activation, your core begin getting tired, then you open up, and then you're using your lumbar spine and maybe your hip flexors to come back. Keep that posterior pelvic tilt and keep your core engaged. Even record yourself, the spine, you wanna see it as basically neutral, maybe a slight flexion, but never into extension. The second compensation is using our hip flexors. Your hip flexors basically flex your hips, so it brings your thigh closer to your body. Now, when we go forward, when we go back, we can either use your core and our lats to come back, or we can either rock back, basically using our hip flexors and flexing from our hips. You want to, as a rule of thumb, whenever you start the movement with your hips, as you go back, your hips stay in the same place and even slightly forward. You can go slightly behind, but what I don't want to see is your hips moving forward and then your hips moving right away back with you. It's a synergistic motion of your arms pulling down, you flexing from your spine, and your hips staying in place as much as possible and only moving back as your body moves back. So, final demonstration of this exercise. So your pelvis in. Also create some external rotation with your arms. Imagine like you want to break the roller away, even though that won't happen unless you're super strong. And then you go here, keep that whole body shape to the maximum range, maybe hold for like 2 to 3 seconds, then back. Do not bring the hips back. Keep it there, and allow your hips to come back with you. An amazing exercise. If you do not have a roller, you can do it on the rings. It will be rings up, roll out. I'm gonna put an overshot right now. And we're back. Give this a shot, front lever, planche, and any movement that basically you wanna keep that flexion position without getting into extension. Amazing exercise to combine with hollow body holds, dragon flags, and planks, which are also anti-extension exercises. We'll see you on the next one. All right, fam, so the second exercise is going to be for our posterior chain. This is going to be kind of an advanced exercise. Don't worry about your cover. So I'm gonna show the advanced variation, and then I'm gonna give you some, it's not a variation or regressions for that, but are exercises that are going to target the same muscle groups and are going to build your conditioning to eventually do this. What I'm talking about is inverted L-sit to inverted hang, also known as upside down deadlift. Let me actually demonstrate the move first, and then we'll talk about it. So grab the bar, shoulder width. So this is an L-sit, this is an inverted L-sit. So this will be the first position of the movement, and then the second position, inverted hang. So you create hip extension, and you go all the way up. Now, I don't want you to create too much lumbar extension, basically that. I want you to create posterior pelvic tilt, and only use your glutes to create that hip extension. Once you get here, extend and rotate your arms, and your shoulders are naturally depressed. So, first point is the arching of your back. So if you watch part 1, which I highly recommend that you watch that part, reverse hyperextension. It is a movement where we keep that posterior pelvic tilt and we work on hip extension created by our glutes, which is what we use when you raise into a planche or once you get into a front lever, which is activating really the glutes. This exercise is an advanced exercise because we are combining both that hip extension action with a strong lat pull down. It's almost like a deadlift. You kind of see it right here. You do the lat pull down, but you also create that hip extension, not lumbar extension, hip extension. I really want to make emphasis on that. How you create hip extension without lumbar extension is keeping that posterior pelvic tilt and simply extending at the hips. So if you want to get good at this exercise, or if you want to be able to do an amount of reps that you can get some benefit out of it, so at least 4 reps, and you can go all the way until 15, depending on your training attributes that you want to get good at. Then do pull-ups, do maybe tuck front lever holds, but just doing pull-ups and just doing the exercise that I'm going to show you, or any hip extension exercise like the reverse hyperextensions, or even just glute bridges I'm going to show you right now, then that's going to activate that hip extension motion. And if you have enough lat strength for the straight arm lat pull down, then you're going to nail that movement. So the variations or the regressions for this exercise, because as I said, it's a pretty complex and advanced exercise, it will be a shoulder stand in yoga or a candlestick. You can do it dynamically, or you can do it holding the position. I would recommend to do reps and then hold at the top. What I'm talking about is you're gonna place your hands right in the floor. You're gonna lay supine in your floor, basically with your back down. You get into an L shape and you do the same movement only with your hips. Now we're taking the arms out of the equation. So from here, raise up and then extend at the hips. No lumbar, but extend at the hips, keeping that posterior pelvic tilt. You can support yourself if you're doing holds. Now, I want you to see the distinctions between arching your back and posteriorly tilt your pelvis and creating hip extensions. Basically, if you film yourself, I should be pretty straight from the top down. You can also do it dynamically. So you place your hands right here, you go here, up, down, up. No need to go all the way down. You can just go right here and work on that range of motion. This will really teach your body how to create that hip extension. Reverse hyperextension by far would be better than this one, and it's also a more advanced exercise. But if you reverse hyperextensions, you tend to arch your lumbar spine, or in this one, you don't have the lat strength to basically get yourself up. Candlesticks or shoulder stand is an amazing exercise to get into. And if you're also very, very beginner, I give you was one exercise to really focus on the hip extension, because we tend to, this is this exercise, we tend to just drive our hips up, hip thrust, and we don't pay attention to what's really happening at our core, which is what we're talking about on this video. You wanna keep a posterior pelvic tilt first. To measure, you can put your hands, and it should be your index finger, your middle finger with your heels. Now, my hands are gonna be right here on the exercise, but I want you to see the activation. Posterior pelvic tilt, keeping that posterior pelvic tilt, you rise, you hold for a couple seconds to really feel that glute engage, as well as your hamstrings. Hip extension, I cannot emphasize it enough, whether you do reverse upper extensions, whether you do upside down deadlift or inverted L sit, inverted hang, whether you start with glute bridges and you pair that with some shoulder stand, get very used to keeping that contraction on the anterior part of your core while activating the lower part, posterior part of your core, of your legs, which is going to be your glutes and your hamstrings. I'll see you on the next one. All right, family, do you guys want the visit? Do this exercise 100%. It's going to be the reverse plank, another posterior chain exercise. Let's get right into the exercise. So we cover anterior chain, the ab rollout. We cover posterior chain, the upside down deadlifts. Now this is another posterior chain exercise, but now, first of all, is an isometric hold. And second of all, it puts your hands in a very different position that is very, very useful for certain type of skills, namely the visit and the back lever are the only two that I can think of right now. Maybe we have more, where you have your hands actually behind your body and not in front of your body. You have the planche, you have the front lever, you got the handstand, but this is a back lever or a supine back lever, and then you have the visit, which is the ability to get your arms behind your body. So this is shoulder extension. Most of us do not have that much mobility right here. It depends on what have you done for your shoulder mobility. This is an active mobility exercise to get that shoulder extension. It would also involve your rhomboids when you activate the hold, and you activate your entire posterior chain, creating that hip extension one more time. So let me demonstrate the exercise first, and then we'll go through some variations and modifications. So palms can be either pointing forward, or if you want more of that retraction action, I would actually recommend to place them in a supine position, so your fingers facing back. Then you raise. You need to adjust sometimes, maybe walk your feet a little bit forward in a way that you end up in a straight line, shoulder above the wrist. Maybe you need to adjust a little bit, and your shoulder aligned with your hips, and your hips aligned with your toes. You create super external rotation with your shoulders, and you retract your scapula as much as possible. You do not shrug, but you keep your scapula depressed and retracted, and you keep lifting those hips up using your glutes, not using your lumbar spine. So the same concept as we talk about when we're targeting that posterior chain is activating those glutes to drive the hip joint into extension. Your scapula is going to be retracted and depressed, and you're gonna raise the arms up. This is super important. Sometimes we tend to relax right here. Really, really squeeze those shoulder blades together as much as you possibly can and create a long line with your body. Again, this exercise is amazing for the visit. If you see a visit, basically your arms go behind your body. Now, it's even more so for the mana, where your arms are really in full, complete extension. But even if you're working towards the L-sit or something, having that shoulder extension motion will really also balance out your body, because we tend to do a lot of pushing, we tend to do a lot of pulling, but everything is in this plane. We don't do often in this plane. So we want to target that area, that range of motion, and we also want to strengthen our rhomboids and basically our entire posterior chain. Modifications for this exercise is you would do reverse table tuck to really get used to that, both the shoulder extension and the hip extension, both extensions are. You go here, then you go up. Again, maybe my shoulders are a little bit behind. You adjust, you find your point, and then you go back up. Same drill that we did with the glute bridges and with all the posterior chain. You posteriorly tilt, and then you raise. It's not that you raise mindlessly. Yes, you might get some core activation, but my lumbar spine can get into flexion, and that is not actually transferable to calisthenics skills. So you want to posteriorly tilt, get here, make sure your neck is not crunching forward, but you relax your neck, and also retract your scapula. So first variation will be some table tuck lift, or table tuck hold, and then reverse plank hold. If you are more advanced and you want to get some extra work, especially for the posterior part of your shoulder, you can do some pulls, which is going back and then forward, back, and then forward. I would need some slippery floor to do that. Or you can simply lean back. You can also do this on your elbows. Again, this might be like top 25 exercises for your core. But anyways, this is also called reverse Victorian hold. You can do it on your elbows. You can really focus on the scapula without the pain on your wrist maybe. If you have some pain on your wrist, you can really lean back and create more stimulus for your triceps and for the posterior part of your shoulder. Again, an amazing exercise for your entire posterior chain, both your shoulders, your rhomboids, your entire posterior chain on your scapula, your glutes, your hamstrings, your entire rectus spinae, so you don't enter into flexion. You need to keep that extension. It's very weird at the beginning, especially if you are not used to doing posterior chain exercise, but as you do this exercise over and over, like anything else is practice, you'll become very good at it, and you'll feel an stability in your body that you have never felt before, especially if you have never done this exercise. So definitely give it a shot, either at the beginning of your workout or at the end of your workout as a conditioning, and enjoy the gains. We'll see you on the next one. All right, guys, for exercise, we are talking everything about the obliques. So you got the external obliques, you got the internal obliques. Externals run this way, more superficial. Internals run this way, they're more internal. Basically, your obliques does rotation and it also does side flexion. What I demonstrated there is a handstand side bend, because if I had to choose one skill that I would preferentiate side plank, which is the exercise that we're going to be doing, it'll be anything that involves your obliques. And in calisthenics specifically, like in the calisthenics world, not in the movement world, we do a lot of statics things in this plane. We don't do anything, or we don't do a lot on the transfer plane. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't train rotation or that you shouldn't train side flexion. But the exercise that we're picking up here is going to be a static hold, side plank. Let me actually demonstrate that. Go right here. Sure your hips are not sinking down. You're pushing up. You're also keeping that posterior pelvic tilt to activate both your core. Engage your transverse abdominal by sucking your belly in, and really feel both the right obliques and the left obliques. In this case, mostly the right obliques to get into that movement. The side plank, it is an anti-side flexion movement, meaning, and the good thing about, one thing about side flexion and your obliques is as you strengthen one side, you are stretching the other side. But it's an anti-side flexion because if I don't side flex, I'm going to end up into a side flexion on the other side. So it's keeping that obliques engaged to be in that full straight line. What is this useful for? If you're holding a front lever, which is purely anterior focus and mostly lats, as I talked about in my previous video, 70 to 80% upper body strength and anterior core is like 20%. You also need those obliques to really create that cinching motion and be completely stable in all directions. And also if you are in front lever and you want to go into one side, I want to put another shot from my brother, my cameraman right here, doing that. We go back. If you want to get your planche or front lever to the next level and you really want to move within those static holds, you need some rotation and you need some side flexion. So on side plank, you can do a variety of things. You can work on your side flexion by going down and up. You can also put a weight belt on right here to really, that's when to push your hips down and you're gonna push those hips up as much as possible, which is the most important part on this exercise. You can also work on some rotations to get it. But if I had to choose from all the dynamics exercise that I chose, that I said, and the side plank, for calisthenics skills, I would really work on just getting stable on my side plank and building endurance on my side plank. You're also getting an additional component of a straight arm. An additional tip, I would say, push your serratus out and really create stability in your scapula, not only in your core, and only then plant your hand. A good way to activate this without getting too intense into the exercise is you're gonna place one knee down, you're gonna stack that knee with your hand, and activate your serratus first. Everything is intact, and this is a side plank, basically a variation of side plank. As you get more advanced, then you can bring it up right here. And you can also do it on your elbows if you have any wrist pain and you still want to work on the conditioning of your scapula, right here. Or you can do it on a physio ball. Maybe it doesn't have any additional like stability muscles that we have, but it's an additional challenge and it's super fun. I'll put another overshot right here. That's it. Basically any exercise, or the side plank, an exercise that do not allow you to get into side flexion or not have control into that side flexion. In that movement on the side bend, I went down. If you wanna come back, you need to literally use the other side of the oblique to bring yourself back up. So if you are into side bends, if you're into hand balancing, which we also do some rotations, we do a lot of things with our core, then side planks should be in your routine unless you have done it in the past or unless you are doing other oblique exercises. But if you have never done side planks ever, I would highly encourage you to give it a try. It will transform your entire core and how you perform in all the calisthenics movements. With that being said, see you on the next one. All right, fam. Of course, we had to add the L-sit hold. I don't know how I didn't add it on the first one, just because it was hard to decide top 5 exercises, which, by the way, we have a bonus exercise. So stick to the end of the video. We have the 6th exercise of the 21st, or maybe, I don't know how many exercises I've listed. But the L-sit hold is more than an exercise that builds a strength for other movement. It's also a transitional movement for many, if not all, calisthenics skills. We go from L-sit to planche, we go from L-sit, and that's a transition towards the V-sit. We go from L-sit to handstand, we go from L-sit to, hanging L-sit to front lever. So strengthening your L-sit position, it is absolutely critical. You can do it hanging. However, this is most transferable to many other skills, such as the handstand, the V-sit, and the mana, and all type of presses. And it's also a counter movement from if you're training handstands, you should be doing L-sit. I don't want to say you should because we're all different, but in a handstand, you're pushing up. In a L-sit, you are pushing down. So let's begin with the scapula. Your scapula should be depressed and retracted to get the most amount of strength for calisthenics skills. You can also do another L-sit variation, which is with more flexibility. That right here, this one requires more strength, but it's more transferable to calisthenics skills. As you can see, my voice start to shake. I don't want to go into too much detail into the execution. You can check our L-sit tutorial where we go into super depth into both of these different methods and how to progress towards the L-sit. So you can find it right here. On this video, I just want to touch that is an amazing exercise that you should add into your routine. Even if you have a V-sit, I still do L-sits nowadays. I do it with ankle weights to challenge myself. You can go dynamically leg raises, so on the deep bar, just raise your legs up. But L-sit, do not overlook the power of this amazing exercise. It should be on every calisthenics athlete's routine for one reason, unless you want to do calisthenics skills and that's it. But if you're on this video, you probably want to do calisthenics skills, so an L-sit, it's an amazing incorporation to do it. Keep your scapula, as I said, depressed and retracted. You can also do it on the floor to challenge yourself. And as a little bonus, before the bonus, an exercise to facilitate that compression. So we've talked about anterior, posterior chain, and also our side or obliques, but this one is in another category, as I like to put it, just like in part 1, the toes to bar. This one is a compression exercise. An L-sit is an exercise that, yes, we use our core as a stabilizing, but you don't see our spine like super flex. You actually are using the most amount of work is by your hip flexors, by your iliopsoas, which entirely crosses your entire hip joint and connects your upper body, lower body with your upper body. If that movement, if that muscle is not strong, then you're gonna drop your legs down. The L-sit is also an exercise that tests your quad strength, because some people just have it right here. It can be a lack of hamstring flexibility, but it could also be a lack, maybe awareness sometimes, but it can also be a strength to keep those legs straight. And keeping those legs straight in every movement that you do that is not calisthenics skills will transfer. So when you do a planche, you have your pointed toes and it's looking nice and pretty. The exercise and the bonus exercise is going to be seated pike compression, a more dynamic exercise, which is this one right here. You've probably seen it in many of our entire library of videos. If you want a detailed explanation on this exercise, and this also falls into compression category, which you guys ask for a core compression routine, Would you like top 5 core compression exercises, or would you like a core compression routine? Let me know down below, and obviously this exercise is going to be in there, but as this video and many other videos, you're gonna have many different variations to really increase that compression strength, which is necessary for the VC, for the press to handstand, and basically for most type of presses, stalder press, straddle press, pike press, and everything that involves pressing up. With that being said, I'll see you on one more exercise, the bonus one. Very fun. For the 11th exercise, probably like the 30th exercise of this series, is going to be a controversial one that I put at the end because it's a bit controversial, and it depends on your weaknesses. If you have a certain condition and you do this exercise, it might not be the best or the smartest thing to do. But if you have another condition and you do this exercise, it will really pay dividends that you might need in your training. What I'm talking about is the arch hollow body hold, or the arch hold, or Superman hold, or Superman lift. Basically this position right here. The opposite as the hollow body hold, this is an anti-flexion exercise, meaning that if I don't extend, my body flexes. So this is the movement. And we just hold there, and you can also do some raises. But let's talk about some modifications, variations, and a little bit of history behind this exercise. The arch hollow body hold, it's a movement that if you have anterior pelvic tilt, pause the video, leave the video, give me a like, and you can go. This is not an exercise for you for several reasons. This is an exercise that it greatly, you are basically arching our entire body, so we're using our entire posterior chain, our entire erector spinae, which is what allows us to get into hip extension, but also our quadratus lumborum and our lumbar spine, which is what we are very dominant in there, most of us. We also engage our glutes, we also engage our hamstrings to create a lever on both sides. So to begin, once you raise, you want to have equally amount of distribution between top and bottom. This is also an amazing exercise to find certain weaknesses. If you find that if you're laying down and you raise here and then your legs only raise up to here, either your lumbar spine or your rectus spinae is super strong in comparison to your glutes and to your hamstrings. So this exercise, only do it if you have either full posterior pelvic tilt, like you tend to have this position right here. It will teach you to create that lumbar extension. And also this exercise is great for a straight arm handstand press because your lumbar spine is into flexion and you create some extension, even though once you get to the top, you wanna not use your lumbar spine, but create a hip extension from your glutes. So even if you do this exercise, the most important part that you need to consider is that your lower back, most likely than not, will take over. If you are a super mobile person, it will take over. If you have no mobility in your back, it will take over because it's a section of our spine that tends to be very mobile. We have our rib cage in our thoracic spine, which kind of limits our movement, which we actually need to work if we wanna get a healthy spine and get good at some movements. But our lumbar spine and our cervical spine is the one that has the most amount of range of motion. So if you suffer from low back pain, do not do this movement. But if you want a complete posterior chain activation, like maybe you have either posterior pelvic tilt or you're super strong in your front core and you truly don't feel your back muscle, especially your extensors, then this would be an exercise I would highly recommend. Now, we saw the reverse hyperextensions on part number 1. That is an exercise that isolates hip extension and posterior chain activation on our lower body. I'm gonna give you another modification that we can isolate only the upper portion to not get so much of our lumbar spine. But if you choose to do this exercise, and I'm not saying this exercise is wrong, I wouldn't put it on this video. Gymnasts use it a lot to just keep that body straight. You don't just want to be strong in this position, you also want to be strong in this position. If you are into hollow back handstands and basically positions that arch your back, you want to have a strong posterior chain to basically protect your lumbar spine in the most optimal way. So, cues for this exercise is going to be a couple of steps that I want you guys to really feel because there are many compensations that can happen. Let's focus first on the lower portion. Let's forget about the upper portion. We have our hands right here. I want you to squeeze your legs together. I want you to point your toes. You're going to engage your quads so your legs become straight. Once your quads are activated, you're going to drag your feet back instead of up, basically creating length through the entire portion of your core. Then you're going to posteriorly tilt your pelvis. You're going to keep that activation, and I want you just to play around with this. You see, I'm still having that gap right there. Your low back may a little bit take over, but what I don't want to see is this. Basically, you might use your lower back a little bit, but the most amount of work and the work that we don't engage as often, or the muscle that we engage, is the glutes. Your glutes is the primary hip extensor muscle that you have, not your lumbar spine, not your hamstring. So focus on the glutes as much as you can to raise yourself up, keeping your legs straight. Now we go into the upper portion of this exercise. I still want you to keep a posterior pelvic tilt. Place your hands, let's start with your hands behind you. And you keep a posterior pelvic tilt and you raise only from your thoracic. It's going to be very, very, very little movement, but that will prevent from the lumbar spine. Now, if you are healthy in your lumbar spine and you want to create some extra strength in your lumbar region and you want a complete posterior chain activation, just make sure that you are really creating length in the exercise and you are not compressing that lumbar spine. And keep a slight posterior pelvic tilt. That will do you more benefits than harm. Create some lumbar extensions if you want to work on your lumbar spine, but make sure that the most amount of work is coming from your erectus spinae, from the thoracic spine, and from your glutes. So glutes on the lower body and your erectus spinae on the upper body. Also, you're gonna retract your shoulders and you're gonna depress your shoulders. I'm gonna do the full variation with my hands by the side, and I'm gonna be cueing you how I want you guys to feel this exercise. This is more of the same as the whole body hold. It is a conditioning exercise, but it's also to feel the movement and to feel your body stable in that position. So you're here. Let's begin with the lower body. So legs are straight, point your toes, engage your quads so legs are straight, a slight posterior pelvic tilt, raise with your glutes. Now on the upper body, you're going to depress your shoulders, you're going to retract your shoulders. You're also going to, this is actually a yoga pose, it's called locust pose. And one of the downsides of this pose in modern day yoga that we are realizing is that our shoulders are internally rotated. I want you to externally rotate your shoulders so you end up in this position. Now, I'm not fully retracted, so I really want you to pay attention that you have all this extra range of motion that you can do. Put your thumbs to the sky so you get more retraction. Lift your legs slightly a little bit higher, and then you go right here. If you're comfortable here, then I allow you to go with your hands in front, no internal rotation, external rotation, really working also on the posterior side of your shoulder. And again, I'm gonna do it now with a slight posterior pelvic tilt, because if you see me right here, I'm creating like a hinge on my lumbar spine. Basically, the most amount of extension is happening there. What I want you to see is something like that. More from the thoracic and more from your glutes. I could talk for ages about this exercise. You just make sure that your primary lower body driver is your glutes, and the upper body driver is going to be your rhomboids and your erectus spinae. And if you're having your arms up, it's an additional exercise. That's why hand balancers use it. It's because you're also getting a shoulder, an active shoulder flexion action. So if you struggle with shoulder flexion, activating the posterior part of your shoulder to get into that shoulder flexion position instead of doing all passive stuff will greatly help you for the handstand. So handstand presses, if you're into acrobatics as well, or if you just want to have a healthy, long-lasting spine, I would work not only on my anterior part, but I work on my anterior, my posterior, upper posterior, your obliques, basically your entire core. That's why they call it your core. With that being said, guys, if you want a more detailed video on back extensions or how to strengthen your low back with calisthenics or low back pain or anything that you guys request, if you guys want the core compression video, please let us know down below. But there you have it. These are our top 25, 30 something exercises, especially for calisthenics skills. We include these exercises in our workout programs in a manner that is effective and that is also targeted to your goals. That's why I make so much emphasis in this might work for you if you have this might work for you if you have this. But if you have anterior pelvic tilt and you do a Superman lift arching your body, then you're going to screw yourself. We make sure that in every single workout program that we have, we give you those modifications, not only if you're a beginner or if you're advanced, but if you have pain in this area, what are the modifications that I can do in order to reap the benefits from this exercise without fucking up myself. So if that's you, make sure to check our online academy. All the information is down in the description. With that being said, if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell button so you get notified whenever we upload a new video, comment, share, and all that YouTube stuff. And I will see you all next week. Much love. I talk a lot, right? Okay, guys. All the description. Ah, fuck. Pa, pa, pa.